of the game fish, they're really protected under fishing laws and everything. So only so many of them can be caught a year. In order for you to go fishing, you can't just pick up a pole and go out there and fish. Right? It seems like you can, but really you have to have a fishing license. If a game warden was to come up to you, and they have the complete right to check your cooler, to check what you've caught. They can count how many you've caught, and they can inspect them to see how you've caught them. So like snapper, I think the catch limit right now is 5 or 7 of them. It changes year to year depending on what scientists have counted in the populations as they study them. And then like you can't catch them with explosives. You have to catch them through a line. Even harpooning on some species is considered illegal depending on the species. Probably about 20 years ago or so, the laws weren't as strict. People would overfish all the time, but now there's so many scientists and so many law enforcement out there watching it. Our populations are actually staying really balanced. And there's even rules as far as like you can only catch fish a certain size. That way you're not messing with like the juvenile species. And then you can only catch so many females versus males. That way we can keep the breeding populations in balance, because you need like so many males to female, that kind of thing, depending on the species. Down here, what's going to enforce it is your game warden. So they work with Texas Parks and Wildlife. They're basically a police officer, but their entire job is on wildlife. So down here, they focus a lot on fishing and stuff, because that's what our community is doing down here. We are a big fisher. They count them. If they've caught too many females, they throw them back. Say like a shrimp boat, when they go out and stuff, the shrimp boat is attached to a company, or like their boat has to be registered with the state. So the state has contact information for those fishermen, and they will send them emails or like memos on these are the catch limits for this year. Because like if you were to go get a fishing license, for normal people like us, normal citizens, we get fishing license. You can get them through sporting goods stores, so like Academy, and Sports Authority, things like that. And when you get your fishing license, it's only good for 1 year. And when you get it, they give you a booklet, and in that booklet it has what season is, like from this month to this month is snapper season, and this month to this month is flounder season, and then it also gives you the catch limits and things like that.
Is there a reason why like our Gulf Mexico fish are like black or like those dull colors?
Just because our waters are a little bit darker. The Gulf of Mexico is considered like a nursery. So I'm sure you've gone to Galveston or heard people be like, the water in Galveston's so dirty, it's brown, it's gross. Really, it's not dirty. What it is that brown color that you see in it when you're looking at it, and especially like you'll see it, sometimes it looks browner than other times. So right now our waters are pretty blue, but as it gets a little bit warmer, you'll start noticing it'll turn that brownish green color. The reason for that is phytoplankton is blooming. So phytoplankton and zooplankton are blooming, and because of the current, the Gulf Current, which starts by Florida and then wraps around, goes through Texas and then into Mexico, that current pushes all of the phytoplankton and zooplankton into Texas waters, which makes our waters that brown color because all the phytoplankton and everything happens to bloom here. So it makes a really good nursery because there's not lots of, besides the waves, there's not really a lot of disturbance to the phytoplankton and zooplankton. It kind of protects them from the Atlantic. They're not having to deal with those kinds of things, and it lets those animals grow. So in the zooplankton, you're going to have like baby crabs, baby jellyfish, baby squid, shrimp larvae, different larvae and stuff like that in the zooplankton. And then the phytoplankton, you're going to have algae and seaweed larvae and stuff like that. So they start blooming and they'll multiply and then they'll grow into larger animals. And then as they grow, they'll move out back into the ocean. So that's why our waters look like that. 6 months after I graduated, I was a marine protective species observer. So what I did is I would go offshore on a barge or something like that out to an oil rig that they were removing. So when they remove oil rigs, they have to use explosives because the metal to the oil rigs goes down into the ground. So they have to be able to break it in order to pull it out of the substrate. So they'll put explosives down into it. Well, those explosives interrupt the natural environment of the animals. What we would do is, because sea turtles and marine mammals are highly protected, and so we had to go out and we would observe all day until they were ready to do those explosives to make sure there were no dolphins, whales, or turtles anywhere in the vicinity. And there couldn't be a dolphin, whale, or turtle anywhere in the vicinity for up to like 2 hours before they did that explosive. So we were constantly watching. We would even go up in helicopters and watch the water. So that's what I did for about the first 6 months after graduation. And then the government cut the program for a little while, so I left that job.
What do you think is like the main cause that negatively affects like our ocean ecosystem?
Honestly, it's probably pollution and, I mean, just having humans in that environment in general. We don't understand the ocean, and the governments and things like that have put way more money into space studies than they have into ocean studies. So in the past, like 15 to 20 years, ocean study has become a bigger field. More people are looking into it. More people are noticing, hey, it's important. It's right here in our backyard. We need to study it. But pollution's a big deal because even the smallest thing is us fertilizing our yards, and then it rains. Well, that fertilizer will run off into our drains, and those drains run off into our lakes and our oceans and stuff. The simplest thing as a fertilizer can affect population. So it can either affect a fish and kill off a fish. In some lakes and stuff, when fertilizer will run off into it, like around golf courses and things like that, they use lots of fertilizer to make that grass look bright green because they want it to look as pretty as possible. I know some golf courses that are actually fighting because they're like trying to figure out how to handle the algae and stuff in their lakes, because they'll put little man-made lakes inside the golf courses. The algae is blooming like nobody's business, and that's because it's feeding off of all that fertilizer that's running into the water. So pollution, in my opinion, is probably the biggest ordeal. Overfishing, we've come a long way in regulating that. Anywhere in the ocean, the pollution's a big deal because here in United States waters, we regulate, boats can't dump their wastewater straight into the ocean. They have to dump it a proper way, just like dumping waste out of an RV. You go to a facility, you get rid of the waste. Boats have to do the same thing. Internationally, it's not necessarily regulated. You can dump water wherever you want to dump your wastewater. You can dump your trash in the middle of the ocean if you want to dump your trash in the middle of the ocean, because it's not regulated. Overfishing in other countries is a big deal as well, but protecting marine mammals and protecting fish, there's lots of international law for it. There's not as much international law against pollution. So I would still think pollution is a big deal. I'm not saying overfishing isn't. It's still a big deal. Over hunting dolphins and whales is still a huge deal. But there's more international protection for it versus just here in the United States.
I don't know, I researched that, if there's, too many, mass bleaching or whatever, they, die, and it's bad for the water, or,
Yeah, so mass bleaching, which we don't have any issues of it here, but in the wild we have issues of it because we're messing with the chemical composition of the water. So, but when they die, they will release a chemical that isn't good for the rest of the corals. And so that's why bleaching is very hard to control, because once one dies, all the ones around it die, and it keeps going and going.
And This affects also the fish.
Yeah, it can affect the fish, things like that. We're trying to stop bleaching as much as we can, watch what kinds of chemicals are being dumped close to reefs, making sure when divers are diving that they're not touching them, because a coral can bleach out just like a flower can wilt. You know, if you go and touch a flower, even if it's still on the plant, you touch it too many times, the oils in your hands will make the flower wilt. The same thing can happen to corals. If you touch them too much, it can make them die and start bleaching out. When you get scuba certified, a big deal is to learn how to control yourself so you're not running into things, so you're not touching things. You observe at a distance. That's the biggest thing about diving. Snorkeling is the same thing, you just don't want to touch anything. But when you do go snorkeling, you are taking a boat close to the reef, which of course is letting out diesel fumes and stuff. Lots of companies, dive companies, will try and keep the boat a little bit away from the coral so it's not affecting it too directly.
This restaurant, who's like the supplier? Is it like
our
the supplier of the seafood?
So all of our animals are fed the exact same fish that gets fed onto these tables. So we feed all of the animals and the humans here all restaurant grade fish. So we don't buy any fish for our animals that is a lower grade than what a human could eat. So all of the fish that gets supplied to here comes from Cisco or Quality Marine Seafood. Those are our vendors, but a lot of our food does come from the wild. But we only work with companies that we know they're completely certified under all of the catch laws. We don't buy from anybody that isn't, certified underneath those laws and everything. So that's why there's so many laws for our food and stuff as to how much of something can be bred or can be caught. And that's why, like, when you go to, especially seafood restaurants, only certain times of the year can you get certain fish. You know, like a lot of places you can't always get flounder all year long. You know, like some places you can't get snapper all year long. There's like oysters, they go in and out of season because you can't always catch them and get them. So those kinds of things, that's why you have lots of fish specials in seafood restaurants, because it's based off of what can be caught during that year, that time of year.
Why do you think like fish are so important overall everything?
To humans, they're a huge food resource, you know. They're filters for our water. Some fish will eat waste of other fish, and then some fish will eat like decaying whales and things like that. Just those kinds of things help clean our waters, help so it's important to protect the fish, just like we were talking about earlier with the food chains. If we aren't protecting certain fish, it can make the balance of the food chain out of whack. So one fish species or animal might become overpopulated where all of the rest of them die off, things like that. So that's the biggest reason why it's important to keep our environment and our ecosystems in check and with the natural balance that they have. I think it's really important to educate kids. If we didn't educate kids on what's here, I've been to lots of schools with kids that live maybe 10 minutes from the beach, whether it's a beach off of right here or down in Galveston, and they've never been to the ocean. They've never fished a fish out of the ocean. Like, they don't understand what's out there, and to be able to bring them to an aquarium where they can see, like upstairs with that tank being predominantly Gulf of Mexico fish, they can see all these fish are right in your backyard. Like, this is what we're looking to protect, to hit them on like a home pride level, you know. And then when they come down here and see the fish from around the world, and they understand we have to protect the whole world, not just the United States or not just Texas. You know, idea down here, at least the education aspect, was to give people an idea that there aren't just fish out in the Gulf of Mexico. Like, we don't just need to protect that part of the world, we need to protect the waters everywhere. We need to think of the pollution everywhere. We need to think of overfishing everywhere. That kind of no problem.